Good morning, TOK. Welcome to class number 20, in which we will talk about the oral presentation. Class 20, what do you know? So, let's talk about the TOK oral presentation. The TOK oral is the first of our standard assessments, and essentially the question is, how do we share a TOK exploration? How do we take what it is we do when we're together and we're breaking something down in terms of theories of the theory of knowledge, and how do we take that exploration and compact it down into a efficient, manageable, entertaining, interesting, and most of all, worthwhile 20-minute oral presentation? I'm going to share a video with you that does a really nice job of explaining some of the finer points of organization. We're going to briefly discuss the rubric, and then I'm going to give you some recommendations of resources to go and find some interesting TOK oral examples. Now, before I try and reinvent the wheel and tell you guys my own thoughts on this, I have to say, TOK orals are tough. They're especially tough in a new program where there's not a lot of history to look back on. The first time I started running TOK orals, I would say it took a good 2 years before we got a really good one. And even that was more due to a really hardworking and perceptive student than it was a really efficient system. Having said that, there's a gentleman named Mr. Heller, who is a TOK instructor, whose students speak very highly of his organizational approach to the TOK oral. His scores for his scholars have been excellent, and even the people who scored less than excellent have commented that they understood the deficiencies were of their own making and not anything to do with his approach. So I've decided to simply share his approach with you in terms of a video that's been posted, and then we'll go into a little commentary and we'll see how we can personalize this for our own use. All right, so I'm going to assume that you've watched Professor Heller's video. If you have not, pause this video, go back to our TOK homepage, follow the link, watch his video first. There's really not much point in this part of our discussion if you haven't seen his part first. If you have watched it, you know at this point that your oral presentation is 20 minutes. That is a 20-minute maximum. I've seen oral presentations that were as little as 10. They were substandard. 18 to 20 minutes is the sweet spot. You've got those minutes, use them. You're going to find meaningful, worthwhile elaboration on your points. And you're going to practice it until you're at that 20-minute mark very consistently. How are you going to be assessed? How are they going to score this thing? Well, there are 4 descriptors. There are 4 tasks which you must complete with your oral presentation, each of which is scored from a 0, which is essentially a no score, off topic, outside the range of the discussion, didn't complete the task, to a 5, which is the fantastic, why are you not teaching this course yourself? 5s don't require perfection. IB scores typically don't demand that you be perfect. A high score represents an excellent level of achievement. And I think that's something that's going to be within our grasp. And with descriptor A, identification of knowledge issue, you'll see some different phrasing if you look online for different resources. Everyone agrees that you start with a real life situation, also sometimes called a real life scenario, an RLS. This is the thing that you notice in the real world that inspires you to approach it through the lens of theory of knowledge. In Heller's presentation, he talks about extracting the knowledge issue. Knowledge issues, knowledge claims, knowledge questions, different generations of materials seem to mix and match these. I am I'm not certain what the absolute latest preferred terminology is. That's something that I've put on my research list and should know shortly. I've got conflicting information in the normally reputable sources I go to. Here's what that means for you. We know that you're going to start with a real life situation and that you're going to end with the question of knowledge, a knowledge issue, a universal, broadly applicable question that you can then use to apply not only to the original real life situation, but as Heller mentioned, to other real life situations as well. The number of intermediary steps to get there is a matter of some conjecture, and we'll look at the best way to do that. But the essential nature of descriptor A: does your presentation identify a relevant, that meaningful knowledge issue involved, implicit, or embedded in a real life situation? Are you able to take the effect of ecotourism on indigenous peoples and get a broader question out of it? This is descriptor A. Descriptor B has to do with your treatment of your knowledge issues. Does your presentation show a good understanding? Do you have a very superficial relationship to your real life situation and any knowledge claims, questions, or issues that arise from it? Or are you able to strip away the minutia, the details of the real life situation and get to more fundamental questions of knowledge? An example of doing this poorly would be if your real life issue is that the rise of Keurig coffee machines has led to an increase in waste relating from the coffee pods. And your knowledge question you get to is should we be switching to a coffee system that creates more waste? You haven't gone big picture. You've simply taken the name brand out and re-asked a very basic question. It fails the duh test because you look at it, you say duh. So, getting to a more detailed understanding, how does technology and convenience balance against sustainability? Or as technology advances, how does society balance convenience and sustainability as it seeks solutions to problems? That is a broader, more sophisticated statement. And the way that you look at that issue is your treatment of the knowledge issue. TOK oral presentations are not cut and paste. They're not one size fits all. As we've mentioned so many times, there's very few right answers in TOK. The individual component, the role of the knower. Descriptor C is about the knower's perspective. And one thing that I'd like you to do is in your workbooks, where you've got your TOK diagram at the front, you've got the knower at the center. I'd like you to put a little note off to the side with an arrow pointing at that knower that says Descriptor C, knower's perspective. Okay? If you can't personalize, if you can't use first person pronouns, this is the time you say, I think, I feel, I believe, not just in a wishy washy way, I think this is wrong, but in a specific way. I think this demonstrates well that. I believe strongly, based on my other beliefs in, that X, Y, or Z is true or that X, Y, or Z is false. You're looking for arguments and examples that show an individual approach and significance. If it's not a topic you care about, it's virtually impossible to write a good oral presentation because you're going to lose out on knower's perspective. Descriptor D is the big money. Descriptor D is connections. It's, does your presentation have balance? Are you looking from a single perspective, or are you looking from the perspective of multiple knowers or ways of knowing? Does your presentation acknowledge in some way that positions taken would have implications? If it doesn't matter what you think about your knowledge issue, then we're not very interested in your elaboration on what you think. Finally, is the emphasis on quality or on quantity? If you give me every area of knowledge and every way of knowing connected to your should tacos come with limes or with salsa, or should they come with both? If your treatment is superficial and you've gone for 1,000 paper cuts, 1,000 superficial, surface level connections, you're doing it badly. Ideally, what we want is we want the deep cuts. We want 3, at a most 4 different approaches, each one tied in with a select few areas of knowing, areas of knowledge, and a few ways of knowing. Because although theoretically any approach can connect to any topic, in practice, we want to see how good approaches connect meaningfully. So we're looking for depth of connection. Okay, so this brings us to the end of our introduction to the TOK Oral. For those of you who missed on Saturday workshop, our goal is to have the oral presentation essentially at a rough draft phase over the next 6 to 8 weeks to finish the year with a solid idea of what your oral presentation is going to be about, what it's going to look like, what it's going to sound like. So you're going to have to figure out fairly quickly, does every real life situation naturally contain knowledge questions? Are there good situations and bad situations? What is the TOK-iness of a topic? And that unfortunately comes with practice. So we're going to be practicing by me sharing a number of situations with you and looking for you to tease out the TOK aspects, the knowledge questions that naturally are generated inherent to those scenarios. And we'll be practicing that over the next several weeks. As usual, we have our sources. There's a link here as well as in the classroom homepage for Professor Heller's How to Do a TOK Oral. The examples that I've given you from the rubric is actually a slightly simplified and consolidated rubric from a TOK teacher named Mrs. Smith. No relation as far as I know. Mrs. Smith's IB website has this rubric presented, and we'll be going in more detail over the rubrics as we get closer to putting our presentations together. Before we leave for the spring break, for your spring break, you are going to have another assignment due, a Padlet type assignment. Please make sure you are current on these. I still have people who have posted to Beauty Padlet but have not updated with their names. So if I don't have your name, I can't give you your credit. If you have any questions about previous assignments or future assignments, I want you to email me at your earliest convenience. Again, after this lesson, I'm not going to be sending everything out via broadcast. I'm simply going to be updating the TOK website. Please make sure that you check that on every class day. That is Monday through Thursday, school days in the morning. And I look forward to talking to you next time. Have a wonderful day.